please help me give a warm Creative Mornings welcome to Yasmine Smith.
Thank y'all. Well, first of all, good morning. I am not a morning person, but I'm here. I got my cup of coffee. You're going to see me take a couple sips of that, and we'll get through it together. So, as been said, my name is Yasmine Smith, Yaz, and I am a proud born and raised Altonite. I'm one of those people that is madly in love with my hometown. And I'm here today to talk to you about, here on Creative Mornings, to talk to you about transit. And that may seem a little bit out of left field, right? When you think of transit and structures and how we get around, creativity usually doesn't come up in that conversation. But I believe that transit and how you engage with transit can be the most creative thing you can do as a human. And I can tell you why. Now, I didn't always think this way, right? It was only a couple years ago that I saw the interconnection between creativity and transit and modality. For me, I'm very fortunate and blessed to know why I'm here on this earth. And that's to make sure that everyone around me is happy, healthy, and loved. And as far as I can stretch, as far as I can reach, I want to. When I was a kid, my favorite question to ask my mother was why? Why things were the way they were? Why didn't that person have food? Why weren't they loved? And I remember one day she looked at me, her child, being only a child herself, and she said, that's the way the rules are written. Of course, the follow-up question to that is who exactly writes these rules? And to that she said, the people in the suits, the lawyers, the judges, the politicians, they're the ones that write the rules. So I decided at a very young age, I was going to be one of those people to write those rules because things weren't fair. And the people I saw around me weren't happy, healthy, and loved the way I thought they deserved to be. This led me to UT Law, where I graduated. And during that time, I was trying to find my space. Where could I be the most impactful? Making sure people were happy, healthy, and loved. And that led me to really hyper-focusing on policy makers in that space, and the nonprofit world, because I saw those two functions really creating the society, if done well, creating the society that I wanted to live in. Now, when you're in these spaces, policy making or nonprofits, especially when you want to help people, that means that you got to talk to the community. That means that people will call you that you do not know to yell at you about things that, one, you probably didn't do, and two, probably aren't true, but you always take the call. You always listen. That was something very important to me. So it was on one of these calls where a community member asked me about transit. How do you feel about transit? And quite honestly, I hadn't really thought about it all that much. Transit isn't something fun and sexy. It's cold and structure. But when I really thought about it, when I really took the time to think about what transit was to me or what I thought it could be, I saw a world where people got around in all different ways, but with every step they took to get from point A to point B, with every step they took, they made the world a better place. They made their neighbors better. They made themselves better, and they were happier for it. So that was the first time I saw creativity in transit. Transit being something, a mechanism to provide happiness to those around me. That led me to PUMA, People United for Mobility Action. And it was there in our launch in October of 2019 where we began asking community members how they felt when they were on public transit. Instead of the same questions of where do you want your bus stop and where do you want your sidewalk, which are all so important, we also wanted to know, where do you feel vulnerable when you move around our city? What do we need to be paying attention to when it comes to your spirit and how you feel when you move through our society? It was at that launch when we asked this question that a woman came up and she began telling me of her experience. And it was an experience she'd been going through for a while. And as she started to talk about this experience on transit, she cried. And I'm a crier. I feel what you feel. I'm an empath. So I cried with her. And during that time, after she was done, she just thanked me. No one had asked her how she felt when she moved around. It was always about the bus lines. It was always about the highways. It was never about her. And for her to just be able to talk and about her experience in transit when it came to her as an individual, her lived experience, she said she felt better and she looked better. You could tell that weight was off her spirit. And that was the second time I saw transit and creativity. Because in that moment, I saw transit as a mechanism to make someone's spirit lighter, to make people healthier. As I continued on my path with Puma, I became very involved in Project Connect. Now, if you don't know, Project Connect is a $7.1 billion plan, regional plan to connect Austin. And before Puma got involved, the conversation really was, it was 10 at that time. Conversation really was, Austin needs transit. Here's your transit. Take your transit and like it. But with Puma, People United for Mobility Action, and a coalition we built that included Austin Justice Coalition, AJC, and Planning Our Communities, POC, the conversation began to take a different turn. Instead of just bus lines and rails, we start talking about equity and how those systems would impact people on the ground. We added the beautiful equity nuances you see in Project Connect, which include $300 million for anti-displacement and stabilization, making sure that the most vulnerable of our communities are protected no matter what happens during this process. It also meant creating an assessment tool so we could track equity and know when equity was in jeopardy. That assessment tool and those key performance indicators all being co-created with the community, letting the community guide. And if that assessment tool said, Project Connect is going off the rails, equity is in trouble, it would trigger a city council vote. It would have to be heard at the very next city council vote. And all the things I'm saying are in the legally binding documents because, as been said, I am a lawyer at the daytime. It was very important to me that I didn't have just, promises, but we had those assurances built in and baked into the legal binding documents that would create this project. And that was the third time I saw creativity in transit. Because to walk into a policy area that is usually so cold and think of it in a way that advanced equity, to think of it in a way to help those around us, all those around us. I saw that as love. Love for yourself, love for your society, love for your community. And quite honestly, in this time and space that we're in, right? In this time and space that we're in, to look at policy when it comes to transit or any policy or any way that you move in the world, to look at it and move in a way that is guided by love, that's the most creative thing you can do as a human. I mean, hell, that's the way I see it anyway. But, I'm just Yasmine. Yaz. Proud, born and raised Austinite. And I want to remind you that when you sit down in front of your blank canvas, because you are creative, we all are, will you sit down in front of your blank canvas to paint your beautiful masterpiece of what the future will look like? even when it comes to something like transit. I'm here to remind you that before you make your first big, bold stroke on that blank canvas, you must always ensure that your paintbrush is dipped in the beautiful color of love. I know that got mushy there, and I hope that in this conversation you could follow the jumps in logic of how creativity plays in transit. But regardless of what policy you find yourself in or where your passion lies, as long as you let love, which is the cornerstone of creativity, as long as you let love guide, we'll all be better for it. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can, and I'm going to be looking. I have a screen here, so if I'm looking at you. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
I loved your talk, and I loved hearing more about specifically using measurement of equity as a way to hold the path that transit takes in our city accountable, and so we can pivot. I'd love to hear more about, you mentioned like KPIs and things like that, like the actual metrics and like how those things are being measured, and like how you came to like those, like being able to identify that as an important metric for equity.
Well, I love that question. So I am very data driven. I don't like numbers. They're not my favorite thing. Like, I'm not gonna, I can't crunch numbers. That's why I went to school for the complete opposite of that. But they're so important. I'm actually a co-founder of Measure here in town. It's a data organization that uses data for social justice reform. So I've always taken that approach of making sure that there's measurable action in whatever policy or realm I'm in order to truly track progress so that we can all benefit. And in Project Connect, right, the legal binding documents right now have it to where within 6 months after it's voted in, if it should be voted in, within 6 months that equity assessment tool is created with the community, co-created with the community. So we didn't do the KPIs. We set the scene, we set the table so that the community would have access to that table, a seat at that table, and also power at that table in order to co-create their own key performance indicators. It was important to me that I didn't think that I knew all of the things. Now, obviously, I have some KPIs of my own I'd like to track, right? How many people are we displacing? What's happening with the homeless the population impacted by homelessness, the increase or decrease in rent, the amount of people seeking federal or city funded help. Those are the type of key performance indicators that I would like to see. But those are important to me because of my lived experience. What we're hoping, after Project Connect happens, is voted in, and during the 6 months of the creation of the co-creation of the assessment tool, it is our hope and the intention of those legal binding documents that it's actual community members, right? You guys coming in and helping build the key performance indicators that will guide, one, the effectuation of Project Connect when it comes to equity, and two, also the anti-displacement funding. All of the bells and whistles and beautiful equity evolutions that are in Prop A are set to come to fruition, but for the community involvement. It was very important that the community got to decide those key performance indicators, because that's how we were going to grow as a community. And if we're going to do transit and mass transit different this time, then the community has to be centered. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's secretly what I was hoping you would say. I think good design is always driven by the people that you're trying to design for.
Exactly.
So yeah, I love it.
Yeah, neighborhood approach. Each neighborhood's going to have their own thing, right? I can't tell you what's going to work for you. All I could do in that part of Prop A in Project Connect, before it was voted in, all I could do was make sure that you had a seat at the table and you had power at that table. I ensured that. Now, you, the community, you need to tell me if you actually want this thing. Once you tell me you want it, then we can go on to the next step of ironing out that details together.
Awesome. Thank you.
That discussion was great because it tapped into something Yasmine and I were talking about when we first met, which was that user-centered design is actually part of what she's doing naturally. And I would encourage you, if you're doing user-centered design for civic good, you might consider you need a lawyer at the table as well, like Yasmine. So I'm going to let Alex's question come up next. Alex was able to type it out. Thank you for your patience, Alex. I'll speak it just in case your mic's not working, but Alex asks, can you talk more about the money reserved for anti-displacement and how that might be used?
Awesome. So $300 million of anti-displacement and stabilization funding. That the anti-displacement and stabilization, yes. What's that? Well, the coalition and the legal binding documents, it could entail, it was a buffet list, right? Anti-displacement and stabilization could definitely mean affordable housing units, but it could also mean home repair. It could also mean, job creation or anything really tied to the economic development of that neighborhood in order to ensure that those from that neighborhood can stay in that neighborhood and those that have been pushed out of that neighborhood can have a safe place to come back home to. So those are the types, right, of things that this money can be accessed for. But yet again, that's as far as I went, right? I set the scene. But how it's used, that's neighborhood by neighborhood. That's up to the community to decide. Because again, we got to be community led.
All right. While Alex was typing, I saw Nicholas's hand shoot up in the gallery view. So I'm going to unmute you, Nicholas. And hopefully I'm saying your name right. Correct me if I'm wrong. But you're unmuted now. And why don't you ask your question?
Awesome. Thank you. It is just Nicholas. I know it's spelled weird. It's like an ancient German thing. But hey, I really love that talk. So I'm relatively new to Austin. I was Atlanta native. I grew up there and then moved here in April. And transit and the way people get around and just urban development is something that I've always really loved, and it's a very important thing in Atlanta. So this is a really fascinating time to come here and witness all this sort of starting to happen. One thing I'm really curious about is, with public transit and the development of stations and these routes and whatnot, and getting people around the city a lot better, there's often a lot of opportunity for partnerships with the creative community and the design and artist scene, painting murals and installments and sculptures and stuff. So I'm curious what the plans are, and that I haven't really looked too deep into the nitty-gritty on details and that sort of thing, but there's really great opportunities to work with the artist community, and there's obviously a thriving community here in the city, and it's part of the reason I wanted to move here. So I'm just curious what your guys' plans are for interacting with artists and especially people who are probably less represented in the artist community to help out in certain neighborhoods.
I love that question because we have to begin looking at transit in these lenses, right? I know it's not the sexiest topic, right? It's not criminal justice reform. It's not those high ticket dollar items, but we have to begin looking at it at that 1,000-foot view. We're no longer just laying concrete and bus lines. We're laying the foundations of how our society interacts with each other. And when you take that lens of it, then the next logical step is how do you make that space a hub for the intersectionality of spirits to interact with one another. And, that's just a breath away from how do you make that space feel good, which also always leads to creativity and art and through all its modes. And so I think I would love to see, even on a bus line, right? How can we make that bus ride, that 30-minute bus ride from home to work or home to school, how can we make that bus ride a mini society hub, where you connect with your built experience and the people around you. And so when it comes to art, I would love to see, what does inside the bus look like? What are the messages you get? How do you feel when you're in there? Or furthermore, when you're sitting at the bus stop? All of those nuances, those creative nuances, I believe will be dripped throughout the process. But what exact mural or what exact art installation and where, again, completely in the hands of the community. But there's area and opportunity all around the board to bring that into effectuation. And I also want to talk a little bit more about partnerships. Because right now, we are active partners, right? Our Cap Metro, the community in the city of Austin. But I've made it very clear to those in these waters that this is only the first step. That we will be looking for active partners to what I call put in the kitty, just like Austin did when it comes to equity. So when we look at the cities around us, when we look at the corporations that are here, I also want them to be an active participant in creating this new future and evolution in transportation. Some of those funds being for things just like what you're describing, the art nuance of transit and mobility in Austin. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was really insightful.
Look, I'm on my. It's just the second cup of coffee. Don't let it fool you.
All right, I've got 2 more questions that have come up in the chat that I'm going to read. And then I see your hand, Matt, too. We'll see what time it is. We'll get through these questions if we have time for one more. Jen asks, and she's got a little bit of context here. So she's been a lifelong transit user and a 24-year Austin resident. She's been disturbed by some of the choices that Cap Metro has made to impact their users, particularly the remap that forced many people to take several buses after just taking one prior. It also removed stops near vital places like hospitals, schools, supermarkets, etc. So how much focus is going into making sure that people are still going to be able to get to where they need to go and safely?
What was that person's name?
That's Jen.
Jen.
I had that question.
Jen, great question. And I feel you. All right. When I walked in those doors for the first time and being in these waters, look, I don't have any favorites in this game. Project Capital Metro, being a born and raised Austinite, knowing our history, I was very acutely aware of the need to hyper focus on the effectuation of their visions, considering their historical past. That's why it was so important to me that these promises of it'll be different this time. Tell me exactly how it's going to be different and put it in writing and sign it. So I completely understand where you're coming from when we're talking about the weariness that comes with a plan of this magnitude, first of all, and especially by those that have historically not been so great when it comes to ensuring equity of their processes. And so that's why, with the 300 million anti-displacement and the equity assessment tool, we created mechanisms within the system itself and outside the system in order to, for lack of better words, watch very, very closely so that if Project Connect in some type of way was jeopardizing equity, we as a community could step in and step up. And so, I like the line so far. It covers us regionally, north, south, east, west. It's the first time we're going to have a rapid system east of I-35, which I'm very excited about. And especially with that 300 million of anti-displacement funding. Because, we all know that the shiny thing you put in the hood isn't for those in the hood, it's for the people that displace those in the hood. with that anti-displacement funding in order to stabilize those communities, I am very hopeful that will still be able to allow people to access the benefits of Project Connect well after the ground is broken. And so I hear your concern. I know what I'll be doing on game day, but more than that, I know what myself and those in this coalition will be doing after game day if Project Connect should pass. And that's doing what we've done every single day for the past year. It's showing up, making sure that those in the room know who we are, know what we're about, and know you can't mess, and know that they can't mess with us, and ensuring that we provide equity, evolutions in equity. How can it be more equitable every single day? So though I am weary, I am hopeful. Though I'm weary, I'm quite excited because this is something we haven't seen before. And in things that you haven't seen before, those are the spaces where you can reimagine well past what you thought was possible. I can't promise perfection. When you do something revolutionary that has never been done, you'd be lying if you said that it was all going to turn out the way you thought it was going to, because you've never done it before. What I can ensure, though, is that this is a different beast. And again, when you work in something that's never been done before, those are the moments that we actually transition as a society and can actually evolve our thinking and our understanding and our systems to benefit all of us.
Okay, Yasmine. I think we've got a good question to kind of end the Q&A session on. Matt, I see your hand, so I'm going to ask kind of a two-part question. One is for folks like Matt who may have questions after this, and folks who have light bulb moments after this, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you? Mm-hmm. Maybe you can say that quick and we'll put it in the chat. Mm-hmm. What's the best website?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So you can go to Puma, Puma, -atx.org, and there's a contact us section.
The last question coming from Liberty, like I mentioned, I think it's a good one to wrap this Q&A session with. She asks, other than voting and monetarily supporting this initiative, what actions should each of us do to help?
I love that question. We need you to be engaged. We've taken the ball as far as it is appropriate to take, ensuring that the community has a seat at the table and power at that table. But I like to think of it as cooking gumbo. I don't know how many people I'm going to lose in this, but your first step to any good Creole dish, right, is your roux. It's that base roux that you make. And so that's where we are, right? We've created this, it has all the seasonings and we're stirring the pot. We're over at the stove top and we're stirring. We've made the best savory roux possible. But in order to get to that next step where we put in our vegetables and our meat, that isn't my lane. That's where I turn to the kitchen table and I ask you to come over and help me stir. And so I need you to help me stir. I need you to help me be vigilant. The people in this coalition, we've battled. We've shown up every single day. And though, though I love and respect those that help my city be the city it is, when it comes to equity and fighting for equity, it's a hard job, so especially in the systems that are already built. So I need your hands. I need your voice. I need you to be here with us on this train. And if you don't think transit is for you, you're wrong. Mass transit is about you, you're wrong. It is about you. It helps all of us when it comes to our environment, when it comes to helping your neighbors with anti-displacement, when it comes to being able to move around our city and across the region to interact with each other. We're all in this together. So I need you to step up and I need to hear your concerns. I can't put things in legal binding documents that I don't know exist. I made sure to hyper focus on things that I understood because of my lived experience, but your lived experience is different and beautiful and with its own merit and should be discussed and supported in all the ways that we can. But in order for that to happen, I need you to step up. I need you to and to speak up. So that's what I would say. Be engaged, and again, always remember that when you're engaged, you are doing so for those around you to ensure that the furthest reach possible you can have when it comes to making sure people are happy, healthy, and loved is achieved. So step up, speak up, be engaged, and act in love. If there's anything that I could bestow or say or press upon you, is that we're all in this together. And it's only love that is going to help us get to the other side.
I feel like we just need to sit in that for a minute. Thank you for bringing that. Thank you for bringing your whole self in such a positive way, not only to this moment, but to this community. I feel extra lucky today to call Austin home because, Yasmine, you're in it. So thank you so much for sharing time with us this morning.